Hey folks, welcome to episode 1 of SORAPod, or the Society of Reluctant Anthropologists podcast. Now, don't let the name fool you. This is a podcast for everyone, not just anthropologists. We will be interviewing people who are doing all kinds of cool things, imagining new possibilities, and thinking deeply about a bunch of different topics. For this episode, though, you'll hear us three hosts, Maureen, Sahil, and me, Nayantara, talk about how we became the Society of Reluctant Anthropologists, why we decided to do a podcast, and a little bit about why we're asking these questions. First, a bit of housekeeping. You'll hear some bleeps. That's where we forgot to censor ourselves and use people's names. There's also a bit of a shift in audio quality about halfway through. It will get better in the second half. Just bear with us. We're still figuring out our tech. And lastly, this is a bit of a long episode. We don't anticipate future episodes being this long, but the conversation was so good we had to keep it going. You can't blame us. We've been friends for over a decade. We had a lot to talk about. So, welcome to the Society of Reluctant Anthropologists.
Welcome to SORA Podcast. It's Nayantara, Sahil, and Maureen here for our first episode. Today we'll be getting into who we are and what the heck SORA is. So let's start by doing a round robin introduction of ourselves. My name's Maureen Pritchard. I graduated with my PhD in anthropology from the School of Oriental and African Studies. I did my master's degree in ethnomusicology at OSU, and I have a bachelor's in Slavic studies. My intellectual interests, aside from being a mom and gardening, are I'm really interested in all aspects of music and what music does for us as people. So in ethnomusicology, we call that musicking. I'm very interested in musicking. And what have I done since the PhD? I think I've done absolutely everything. I've worked in a garden store. I've worked a bunch of customer service jobs. And my favorite thing that I did was work as a case manager for people suffering from very severe and debilitating mental illnesses. And I liked that job because it put all of my anthropological skills to use.
I can go next. I think I'm always like waiting. I'm like,
It's like being in school again, isn't it?
Well, so my name is Sahil. I like Nayantara Maureen did a PhD at SOAS and a master's in law and anthropology at LSE, and then a bachelor's at what Nayantara and I like to joke as a small boutique university in Washington, D.C. called Georgetown in foreign service. So a bit like Maureen, I actually was going to study musicians in Afghanistan for the PhD and ended up working with Afghan migrants in Delhi. My intellectual interests, as Maureen said, I think are varied, but as a whole, I think I'm interested in questions of social complexity and how to understand that, and as well as looking at how nonverbal communication, so music, memory, emotions, these kinds of things are intrinsic to community building as a complicated process. Since the PhD, I've also done several things. I've worked with the National Health Services and mental health research and development. I kind of fell into doing public health anthropology work at a university, quit my job, and have done consulting for lawyers, writing expert anthropological reports for asylum cases, consulting with development organizations, and mostly with the WHO these days, doing new vaccine introductions and antimicrobial resistance, but I also co-lead a religious community here in the UK. That's it for me. So Nayantara.
Hi, I'm Nayantara. I think also like place is sort of important. So I'm outside of Philadelphia. Maureen is in Columbus, Ohio, and Sahil is in London. So we're kind of
Not London, Ohio.
I mean, I'm often in London, UK.
He's also a globetrotter, so unlike the rest of us.
It's really unfortunate they can't see our videos.
We can post some of this. Why not? We're not doing this for anyone.
Nayantara.
Sorry, teacher. So I'm Nayantara. I'm outside of Philadelphia. I did 3/4 of a PhD at SOAS with Maureen and Sahil. I did my master's at Goldsmiths, which is what made me think I wanted to do a PhD in the UK or do a PhD period. That was a bad idea. And then I have a bachelor's in film production from Temple, Go Owls. Let's see, intellectual interests. I don't know. What are my interests? I have recently taken up oil painting. I don't know if I've told you guys this yet, but I've recently taken up oil painting and it's so exciting and it's so messy. And I think that's what I really like about it is it gets everywhere. It's all over your hands and things like that. But otherwise, really like my interests are breaking shit, working with communities to break systems and institutional violence and things like that. So that's what I've been doing also since my PhD. Well, I worked in advertising, then I started a nonprofit, then I worked in philanthropy, and now I'm a consultant. And I get to help people break shit, which has been really, really, really fun. And I think also this is why I've been telling everyone I'm going through an adult goth phase. I started wearing all black. And I think this might be why. I think I'm getting back to like my teenage self where I was like angry at everything and kind of an anarchist. And then I like unlearned all of that, or I guess the world sort of beat it out of me. And then now I'm back to like being an anarchist and angry anarchist, an angry goth anarchist. So that's a little bit about me.
Very good.
It really is like being in school. Maureen's such a teacher.
I am such a teacher because my parents are teachers, and I just
That's
can't
true.
help myself.
And also Sahil and I can be a bit feral at times, so it's probably for the best.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Let's go again and have each of us state what we understand to be the nature of this podcast and what we hope to bring to it or gain from it. And don't dare start with me.
Okay.
Well, maybe we just go in reverse order.
All right, fine. Reverse Uno.
Reverse Uno. Reverse card.
Okay, so the nature of this podcast. For me personally, what I'm really interested in is what is knowledge? I think especially as coming from an anthropology background and being a brown woman in anthropology who was told that they were a native anthropologist and had to jump through all these other hoops. Like, what is the nature of knowledge? What is knowledge? What is the academy producing and reproducing as that like idea of knowledge? And I think the other aspect of that I'm personally really interested in is like in our with the access to technology that we have and the quote unquote democratizing of access to knowledge, what is the future of the academy? And that to me is like really, I mean, it's a really personal interest, but it's something that I think will be explored as we talk to people in this podcast and learn about all these other experiences and all these other viewpoints and all of that. I think everyone has kind of a thought on that. So that's what I'm interested in. And I don't think that's what this podcast is about, but I think that's what I bring to our kind of collective vision of this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, we've had this conversation, obviously. It's always really interesting for me to see how there's sort of this base from which we're all coming. But I mean, because I'm also interested that's in this question of, what is knowledge, but also how do we value it? Like why certain kinds of knowledge are valued, how, that's really shaped, in my view,
Yeah.
by sort of this, by like neoliberal, whatever, capitalist, like understandings of value. But also, I think, during what prompted me actually to sort of go into the PhD, and I bet I think Maureen and I are probably on the same page as this, like, is also that, like, knowledge is always being produced, and this, so this other question is not so much about, okay, well, how do we value it, but then also how do we recognize, like, other ways
Mm-hmm.
knowledge is produced, and in not just as it's happening, but how can we imagine something,
Right.
different for the future? And that's, I guess, what my my interest is. And I think that all of these things are deeply intertwined.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Agreed. I think I just have this whole problem with the phrase knowledge production. I'm just unsure of what I think about it. And I think it's actually because Sahil and I agree on something, which is that what we know isn't always put into words or written form. Like there are things that we know that we don't know that we carry in our body or in our senses. And it's just because of the way we define knowledge, it just gets weird calling it knowledge production. So I have tension. I'm here to bring tension with the phrase knowledge production. But also something I'm really looking forward to in this podcast. We've been having a conversation for like 10 years now, and we're enjoying it. But I'm really interested in finding other people who share aspects of this conversation and just hearing whatever it is they have to say and just kind of expanding the conversation out more. And I'm also interested in kind of creating this community through this podcast of people who
Yes.
are they may or may not be working in academia, but they definitely have a relationship to the world outside of academia and need some support in that relationship. So I'd like this podcast to serve them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know about, I'm sure you guys have also experienced this, but all the people that we've met in the 10 years since leaving the academy, has it been 10 years? Leaving our PhD programs, I should say. Uh, we've met like all these people from all walks of life who maybe have roots in the academy or are thinking about going into a PhD program or came out of a graduate program for whatever reason or graduated or whatnot. And they have these really interesting trajectories. And because we've been sort of dissecting our own dissecting our own why can't I say that? Trajectory. Oh my gosh. I just said it too. I think it's really interesting to see kind of what the possibilities are, boundless, but let's take a look at some other ones.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting. That's all.
It is. Yes.
So something our listeners don't know is that this is take 2 of our podcast because we just had too much fun in the first one and we decided it was too much of an inside conversation and no one would be able to follow it. So we're re-recording.
Which is why Maureen is the teacher this time, to like keep us on track.
Yes, that's why I'm here, being teacherly. So in listening to ourselves, we concluded that what we were really talking about was community building. And yeah, this sounds so stereotypical for us anthropologists to be interested in community building, but it's interesting, and we will explain to you why in a few minutes. So nobody knows it, but we all met in our PhD program at SOAS. And let's walk our listeners back to the day the 3 of us sealed our friendship over a cup of weasel food coffee and the surrounding details.
I think one of you found me in the lobby of SOAS, and I wasn't friends with any of y'all. But you guys had like developed a friendship, but one of you was like, come get coffee, come get food with us. And I don't remember which one.
We kind of dragged you along. I think we conspired Like,
Yeah.
Sahil and I conspired because I remember being in on it, but I think he dragged you in.
Oh, that's very funny. Did not know that.
Yeah, we conspired. And
I mean, I remember, yeah, Maureen and I remember us being together and being like, hey, we're going. You should come. A bit like those twins. Come drink
and we
poop coffee with us.
and we
The
were
one from The
still,
Shining.
was it, did we get something to eat too, or did we just get coffee?
No, we went for food. I think the whole premise was food, but then we saw Weasel Poop coffee on the menu. And they had like a half page dedicated to it with an illustration of a weasel on it. And we're like, this must be special. Let's combine all of our little graduate school pennies to buy one cup of Weasel Poop coffee.
And yeah, and share it. And then the
Yeah.
people next to us thought we were drunk because we were being so silly.
I don't know if this is correct, but like my memory of this is that actually there was a place. So we went to a Vietnamese place, but next to it was actually this kind of fast food Indian place. And we were like, let's get food. And we're just walking. And then there's like, oh, there's this place. And it was like, where should we go? Indian or Vietnamese? And I think Nine and I were like, we're going to Vietnamese. Like,
Because, and let's say this for listeners,
right.
we are both South Asian, and we
Yeah.
like didn't want to have more South Asian food. Not.
And also, it was a Indian restaurant full of white people in Soho.
Oh God. Yeah. So we definitely didn't want to go there. I feel like so duped now. Like you guys fire. Your whole friendship.
You were shy.
Yeah.
We
I wasn't.
thought that you were shy and that you just,
No. It was
did
just
that
a
extra little push to hang out with us instead of realizing that you thought we were all mad.
It's all affect.
I didn't think you were mad. I thought I was just a bitch. I was just like,
You mean you were an angry anarchist who wanted to break things, but you didn't know it?
but yes, I had forgotten that part of myself. And so it came out as like an angry reality TV show contestant because I wasn't there to make friends. And here we are 10 years later. Yeah,
Well, what happened post Weasel Poop?
honestly, I don't remember. I think maybe we got drunk off the Weasel Poop coffee.
Not immediately after. I'm talking about the snacks and the colors.
And Dubrovka. Can't forget about
Like,
Dubrovka.
okay, let's start
Back
at
to vodka,
the
guys.
beginning. Let's explain what SORA is and what SORA stands for. The
Okay.
past definition of SORA.
Okay.
That's
Go on,
you
go.
and I.
Me?
Go for it, Nitha.
I just talked a lot about how much of a bitch I was. Okay. So SORA is a Society of Reluctant Anthropologists, and it is a group that we co-created with our entire PhD cohort, though I guess in the same way that you two schemed to eat with me. We schemed, the three of us, to get everyone in on this. And so SORA was, I mean, it wasn't anything official. We just kind of jokingly called ourselves this because we hung out all the time and spent a lot of time together, more so than cohorts previous to us. And it was also a way of building community at the heart of it that allowed us to support each other in what was a really difficult situation for all of us. I don't know how much detail I should go into.
Well, we can get into all that detail as we unfold, but I just want to add like the sheer fact that we decided to call ourselves SORA, like it wasn't like we decided to invent SORA and then get people to join. It was like because of all the unhappiness that was our PhD, we were like banding together in little groups, and then we were like trying to band the little groups into bigger groups. And pretty soon we were like wandering around trying to find places to eat, but as a herd, like no longer as 3 people seeking weasel poop, but as 10 people We didn't even know what we were seeking. Remember that time that we were looking for something to eat and we were just all following each other and no one knew where we were going, and we had to stop and discuss this at some point.
So,
Yeah, I think it was the entire cohort.
It was the entire cohort.
So that was like 15 people.
it was 18 when we started, but I think by the time I think it was 15 by towards the end. But I think it might be useful also for listeners to mention that, in our PhD program, and I don't know, I don't think it's the same in the US, but here in the UK, it's really easy to be atomized. You're treated as individual students, and people often don't come together. Of course, it differs from institution to institution. But at SOAS, we were treated as individuals doing a PhD, and we would come together twice a week, or was it once a week?
Once a week.
Once a week for two.
In one day.
For twice in one day.
Yeah.
Once a week for two quote unquote courses. Well, what was it?
We had the ethnography course, so for half the year it was twice a week.
That one was Ed's one, right?
Yeah, because Ed's was on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so we
had seminar was on Mondays and stats was on Mondays.
Yes. So
and wait, can we just say for the audience, it was like 4 hours of statistics on Monday mornings, right? Like at 8 a.m. or something. It was the worst form of torture.
And I think it was, so that statistics was later in the year, right?
Yeah, because we had the ethnography class the first half of the year.
Oh, I see.
I think
ethnographic methods.
I think the statistics also helped sort of bring us together because it was
a gap. We had that 1 hour gap between stats and research.
And I think we all really struggled with statistics because we weren't a sociology department. No. We were really like a very artsy anthropology department.
And no one
was prepared.
But it was also an inter-university course. So you had anthropology students from UCL, anthropology students from LSE, and the anthropology cohort from SOAS all in one room. And you could really tell, the LSE people were like, they were doing all these projects where they're going to look at herd migrations and statistics and whatnot. And, the UCL people were doing like urban, like how many footfall, blah, blah. And we were all here talking about feelings and emotions and affect and had nothing to do with statistics. And I think, we basically were the bad kids that sat in the back of the room.
Yeah, we all sat
got in trouble.
And I think just for the listeners who aren't going through a UK university system, like we didn't have any choices over what courses we took.
Yeah.
We also I don't think we got syllabuses really or anything. They just like literally were like, show up in this place at this time on this day and you will learn something. But we didn't know the reason why we were taking it.
Exactly.
We weren't receiving
grades. Like we didn't know about
what was going on.
We didn't even know about the statistics course until the end of the first semester. I don't think that was something that they told us about.
The reason was that it wasn't something that we were required to do, but in that first semester, there were the budget cuts and there were a whole bunch of things, and then they instituted this as a new thing that had to be done. But I think that going back just a little bit for our listeners, like when Maureen was talking about us, like kind of, walking around as a horde, it was also because then every day on a Monday, we would all find ourselves kind of, brain dead together outside of SOAS on winter evenings, not knowing what to do. So it wasn't just that. Sometimes we did come together as a cohort, but we did have this one occasion every week for a long time where we would just find ourselves together.
That's true. Yeah. It sort of pushed us together. Yeah. And we moved, right? We had to move from wherever it was, UCL campus, and we all had to like walk together to SOAS, and we just
and we had a hard time.
Yeah.
And I think we started talking to each other then.
And you know what else I think made us kind of the weird people in that group is I'm just realizing so one of the things that we had instituted as part of SORA was every Monday we would pick a color between ourselves and everyone would wear something that was that color, right? So
For
I
example, today we're all wearing something purple.
no, I'm not wearing anything purple
But you
because my
have purple
earrings.
lighting.
That's true. My
Okay.
earrings wouldn't fit under my headphones.
So, okay, keep going.
And so I think that also made us weird because all the SOAS kids would be wearing the same color and sitting in the back and like giggling that we didn't know anything because it was just the strain of it was becoming ridiculous. So I think we also then separated ourselves in that way from the very serious other students there. I say kids, we were all in our like mid to late 20s.
Almost 30. Or
For yourself.
Can we talk about the colors a little bit?
Yeah.
so I was actually I was gonna say something about that while you were talking to Antara. That was really interesting to me that you kind of said it like, we separated ourselves from those sort of, LSE UCL students because I always kind of saw it. We introduced the colors kind of at this point. So we didn't start off all wearing the same colors, right?
No.
Like it came at this point when we had to start doing a presentation on our potential research project. And I think at this point we didn't know it. Later we did, right? But that all of us were sort of being gaslit, and not that we had the word for that at that point, but we were all being sort of psychologically abused by people and institution.
The department.
The department. Yeah. But I mean, I could also say individuals, but they're not there anymore. So, but like, and I think like it was sort of this way to be seen as well. Because initially it was like, all right, if we do this, we're supporting you, we're supporting each other. It wasn't just like that we were like differentiating ourselves. I also feel it like it was also like we were not being seen for who we were as it was a department. And I think subconsciously something is this way for us to like be there for each other and be like, we see you.
Yeah.
Let's fill the listener in for a second.
Yeah.
So in the UK system, at least at SOAS, you show up and your first year is your upgrade year. And your upgrade is, it's kind of like in the States when they do, what the heck is it called? The exams before you become a PhD student.
Like qualifiers?
No,
I can't think of the word.
I'll come back.
But so what you do is you have to come up with this document.
Comps. Sorry.
What
comps.
No.
Your comps. Like that. Isn't that when you?
No.
Yeah.
There's a different word, but let's not get distracted on it. It'll come back.
Maybe it's different at Georgetown. The rest of us went to state schools.
So the upgrade is like a research proposal, but you have to do you're supposed to do all your background reading, funnel that all into the proposal to show that you've got, everything that you need to know. And then there's an exam on it, just like you would have an exam for like a defense for your dissertation. There's a defense of that upgrade paper. And then you get to go on to do your field research. So there was a lot at stake. Like if you don't upgrade, you don't go any further in the program. And we took no classes, three classes that we found really pointless. So we had our ethnographic methods class that for me, I'd already taken like 4 other ethnographic methods class. We had a lot of fun making fun of that class. Then we had to do stats class, which we already said we didn't like.
Useless.
We had to take
that too.
audit, so to speak, that where we learned about all the literature of anthropology before anthropology happened, like from like the time that writing was invented until the Victorian age.
Didn't take that.
I didn't have to do that.
It was so stupid.
Because we did masters that were
anthropology master.
And on anthropology.
Oh my god.
Get anthropology. We only got to Karl Marx.
That's hilarious.
It was
pointless. Wait, was it social theory?
Yes, social theory and anthropology or something like that. It was I loved having Manas as our instructor. That was the only thing that made it worthwhile. But the course itself was stupid. And then so we took those 4 courses and then we had to do this upgrade. upgrade paper in which we were kind of left to our own devices and just told, well, this is working, or you need to read this and you need to factor these things in. And we were just sort of cobbling together these papers. And then in the research seminar, at the beginning of the year, we were being asked to like present different.
We had to read texts, and
Yeah, we
then
had to read text
with-
and that we
with a
thought
partner. We got like
Uh-huh.
partnered, and then we had like some text that we would choose, and then we had to present something about it, and like whether or not it's
well, so we were
looking
given
at or something.
we were also given texts. So Trevor basically was like gave us a bunch of texts, and then like it was like there were
Oh,
different.
you choose within the because I feel like Seamus chose. So it must have been like we were given 2 or 3, and Seamus chose one out of those.
I mean, he could
Definitely.
also do whatever he wanted, and Trevor would be like,
That's true. Having Seamus as a partner for the first like little part of the year, I think kept Trevor's rap away from me. Because I like hid underneath his
"White man?"
Seamus's, yeah, his like white manness.
well,
Also his inherent Irish charm. Let's say that too. He was very charming.
and luck. He truly had Irish.
That's
Yeah,
true. That is
that
true.
is true.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'll have to tell you about the Paris story one day
You did tell me about Paris story, but we can talk about that
I
again.
vaguely remember.
on the podcast. They don't know.
Yes, we will. We'll get to it. But hold on, we're getting off topic.
Yes.
So at the beginning of this research seminar, we had to read these texts, and we partnered up, and that's sort of where Sahil and I first partnered up, because we were interested in stuff that nobody else was interested, except Nyantar was secretly interested in.
And Nadim later got interested in.
Oh yeah, Nadim sort of joined it, but grudgingly, because he was all like into statistics.
They are.
Yeah. So then towards the end, we had to present what we were doing our upgrade on, or some version of our upgrade. And that was super stressful, because what happened in that class was the convener established an environment where criticism was encouraged, but it was not constructive criticism. It was
Critique.
not even
For the sake of critique.
it
It was
was
critique for the
ran-
sake of critique.
criticism with nothing positive. It was definitely
That's
like
true.
down the person.
Yeah.
Like, okay, just for the audience to be aware of how ridiculous it got, like it got so out of hand. At one point, someone asked you, Sahil, like, why you haven't taken into account the difference between ethnic and ethics,
Yeah.
the work that you're doing, and like looked very proud of themselves. And the convener also was like, oh yeah, why didn't you take into account the difference between ethnic and ethics? And like, okay, the person who asked the question, English is not their first language, but for the convener, English was his first language, and he still was like, yes, because someone had said something mean, that is a legitimate question. As opposed to, yeah.
I mean, I think also he kind of had it out for me, as we now know. But just for the listeners, I was talking about ethics and morality, and nothing to do. And I did mention that there are various ethnic groups in Pakistan. So I guess the words were out there.
So I think the important thing here is that our stress levels were skyrocketing. Like they started out high enough because we were in a new
in a PhD program. That's stressful.
It was stressful in and of itself. But then they were just skyrocketing because of like
the department really liked the fact that everyone got afraid and paranoid. They kind of fed off of that energy. And so they stoked that energy, which I think worked with some people and probably could have taken much more of a hold had SORA not sort of started existing as a collective, before the name or anything, But
Can we
sorry.
talk for a minute about how the department stoked that? Like we talked about kind of making us run a rat race, not letting us see, like not doing things that we felt were to our benefit, and having this research seminar, which was definitely us criticizing one another.
Yeah.
What else did the department do to stoke that?
I mean, the big one was the library books. I don't want to name names, but one person started getting convinced that other people were taking books out of the library that they needed for their upgrade on purpose, right? And I remember it coming to a head in one of these Monday sessions, and the convener not saying anything. I mean, he looked pleased. Again, he looked very pleased that this was happening,
I think,
right? Oh, no,
like,
go ahead.
I think there are like two things. I mean, you're absolutely right. Because on the one hand, the department itself functioned like that. The department itself was an extremely toxic place where people were in camps. Or I mean, it's not unusual, but it was like the way they operated was a lot of like backstabbing, kind of coming together against someone. But then I think the way the department, let's be honest, the convener, how that was then transferred to us in a way was, as what I was saying earlier, was like atomize us and try to really prevent us from thinking that we are a cohort. And the way for me that happened was, and I think this is like, it was for everyone, we were supposed to have regular meetings with our supervisors, which didn't happen for most of us. And when they did, it was extremely unhelpful. But the convener then would make us have a meeting with him at some point, in which each one of us were individually told that the problem was with us and nobody else was having a problem. And at some point, we later found
Right.
that this was being said to each one of us. But it just, I think like there was this real attempt to make sure that we were in our own world and scared. And later, I don't remember who it was, but someone told me basically the convener felt that they had taken on too many students in our year because we had 18 people. And saw his job as that of having to weed out, quote unquote, those people who were not probably worthy or intellectual enough or something, in his opinion, to be anthropologists and do PhDs and get the department statistics up to where they needed to be in terms of people graduating. So that's
Man.
But I don't know.
We're all shaking our head because this is new information.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I feel like I've kind of carried around these like conspiracy theories about what's possibly going on because they weren't great at hiding what was happening. It was that you didn't really know the impetus, but you understood that they were all. I mean, it would be impossible for one department to just have like 20 or 30 very naturally super toxic people. There had to be some sort of reason why all of these people were literally the worst versions of themselves.
Yeah.
But I didn't know quite what the reasoning was.
Well, no. Okay, so what I was gonna say is like, yeah, we know, right, all of this stuff. We know how institutions work, how academia works, whatever. But like, we're here, right, to talk about SORA because that is sort of the impetus, right? And I think, we sort of started talking about it. Yeah, there were the colors and all these things, but I think like, our conversations for the last 10 years, I think were really fueled by what we did that sort of ended up in a way countering this, this attempt by the convener and the department to prevent us from having like a sense of community.
I mean,
Let's say what we did.
Yeah. So it was what is now like very in the mainstream understood as like organizing against institutional violence. That's exactly what we did. We organized ourselves to create the supports that were necessary to live in the system of institutional violence, right?
We didn't organize ourselves in any form of any systematic way.
No.
Like I said, we were heard. We organized ourselves through feats of the imagination, through making up a name for ourselves, the Society of
Yeah.
Reluctant Anthropologists, by telling fantastical tales to each other about our cohort, by
I mean, just wearing the same colors, showing care for each other. We baked or we brought in snacks every Monday. Um, we tried to show up for each other as much as possible. I think that was a big thing, is like the whole thing was predicated around ideas of care. We wanted to care for each other because the department wouldn't.
yeah, and it was very emergent. Like it
Mm.
was just kind of spontaneous, and someone would do it, and somebody else would be like, "Oh, Nayantara brought cookies last week. I'm going to bring something," because we like eating while we're at the seminar because we don't have to listen. We can just focus on the food, you know.
And I
Yeah.
remember it was also like, we basically, it wasn't just care in terms of, showing up in that space of the seminar. It was, most of us didn't have supervisors or even our second supervisors there who were
Mm.
either listening to us or supporting us, and we showed up for each other. So the thing that seminar in theory was supposed to do was that, oh, we would read each other's work and comment on it, which it wasn't happening. But then what we did was outside of that seminar, outside of these, see each other, talk to each other, and say, hey, that idea is really cool. Like, I'm working on that too. Have you thought about this? I just read this thing. And that might sound really normal for American PhD students. And even, having worked at different other universities and different departments in the UK, it's really normal for some people. But for us, it was absolutely just not available. And that's something that else I think that, was really, I think, care, because it was done again with this thing of listening and seeing you for where you are and trying to support each other to like not drown.
I mean, it's sort of doing the things that we're supposed to do as anthropologists, but like we're only taught that like deep listening is supposed to only be directed outwards, right? And never like to each other. It shouldn't be a personal philosophy. It should only be part of your academic work. And it's like weirdly worthless internally or amongst us. Um, and we know that this was kind of the case because like we knew people from other cohorts who were blown away by the fact that we all were in community with each other. I think at the time we would have said like we were all friends, we all liked each other. And it's true, we were all friends, but also there were,
We didn't all like each other. We just
yeah.
decided
I
that
was
we
trying
would
to find
all
a
stand
nicer.
by each other.
Yes, yeah, which I think is more what community is, right? It's not like, oh, we just all like the three of us ended up being very good friends and like have maintained a friendship over the years. But the whole group, there were definitely like personality clashes and things. But yes, it was like a very purposeful, let us show up for each other, let's give each other the time we need, and like we would end up every once in a while hanging out with someone that we didn't know very well in the group and spending time with them. And that was just, it was part of showing up and being together and being in community. And I think that's a really, in reflecting on our time at SOAS, I think that is a big takeaway because even now, when people talk about building community, we talk about the things we have in common, or it almost is like a friendship kumbaya thing, but it's actually not. It's like making a decision to be a good person in the world in opposition to all these forces to support other people who you might not really like and you might not, you might hate the music that they listen to and think that they dress badly or don't like the way that they approach dog training or whatever it is, but you show up and you,
I,
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
that's a really important point because what it was, of course, we had all these things like the practice of community that, you and Maureen both mentioned through the colors, through the care, through everything. But also it was that recognition of difference as part
Mhm.
of community and allowing for the differences to exist. So, for example, there were people who did not want initially to wear a color, right? Um, but then, and it wasn't like you must do this, but it's sort of like, all right, you don't want to wear a color. What, for your thing, what would you want to wear? Let's, yeah.
And I think that's the key, is that whenever we met a lot of tension But
Mhm.
each time we met tension, we like, because the important thing was the relationship, we
Mhm.
like worked it out. And we worked it out through humor, we worked it out through pranks, we worked it out through negotiating. Okay, you don't want to wear any color except for black. So can we try stripes? We try pattern?
And
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think because this isn't an organization, right? I think now we've all had so much experience in like, especially the nonprofit space. Um, this like it was so much easier to do that negotiation because it was like through a very friendly lens, right? Like, ha ha ha, you always wear black. Why don't you want to wear color? A little bit of gentle ribbing.
Yeah.
And people came around.
be careful, that's what they say in the old boys clubs.
Well, I think we need to talk about our 19th cohort.
I was just about to say, like, all of this stuff around, like community as emergent. So, I mean, I think there was the practice of community, but then there's also, like all of us and thinking about this podcast, like, are talking about, what is the future? How can you imagine things differently? And I think, yeah, we have to talk about how we imagine community differently.
How we personified community, right? I mean, it was such a okay,
Okay,
we're
so
gonna get into
Alexandra
it.
Zubrovka. Her
Well,
name
we're
is
gonna get into it, but I do want to say
uh-huh.
I use the term individual and I forget that it is not a word. Now we can get into
I
why
mean,
that
if
is
Marilyn Strathern says it's a word,
So maybe for our listeners who don't read Madeline Strathern, we need to explain what it's about.
Well, let's explain what a Zubrovka is.
Okay. Alexandra Zubrovka, let's start with her.
you go, Maureen.
Well, one night, no, it was one day after our research seminar, the convener had forgotten the name of one of the cohort members. And she was really, really pissed off about it because he just couldn't ever remember her name.
Yeah,
And he
he
had
would
called her
always call her the wrong name.
Alexandra by accident. And she was
And kept on calling her Alexandra.
And she would correct him too.
Yeah.
But
and
like he
afterwards she
just
woke
wouldn't.
up, Alexandra, who is Alexandra?
She was also Italian.
An angry Italian. And so that's sort of, and then
We
since
started joking. I
Nyantra,
mean, in the same way that we were talking about this like kind of emergence, like we don't have to do anything through policy and regulation. We started joking
joking,
about it. This other person, she must be a great anthropologist because he's always talking about her.
that's right.
And
And
we
then
just kind of kept the joke going.
late one night, Nayantara and I lived together.
Yes.
Uh, we just were like, what if she just became a real person? And so we opened up a Facebook account for her and sent an email and sent a letter of introduction to the entire cohort, and along with an explanation that she was an individual and here was her password, and go. And there were some very interesting and confused, but so friendly and joyous also emails in the morning. I don't remember any of them. I just remember the experience of reading them one by one as they came in. And it
I know.
was,
I wish I had like access to those email accounts
yeah,
because
I think,
imagine what that would be.
yeah.
Yeah, she just then kind of took off. She was her own person and she existed in the world. And she got a last name. And I don't know how she got this last name.
So the way she got the last name,
I
yeah,
know
but
she's a vodka heiress.
it was. I mean, so this is maybe I'm misremembering, but it was a party at your house, Nayantara, and everyone was there,
Hmm.
and that's also where we hatched this plan that Alexandra needs to write a research paper because her research topic was, our cohort
Yeah, she was doing anthropological research on anthropologists.
on anthropologists and and I think we even came up with some term like we were coming up of course what was it? It was like lubricating Like,
Oh yeah, what was
like it, no, I'm sorry, you'll have to edit that out, but
No, it's fine. It's staying in.
but it was something like,
it was
the
lubricants of imagination or something.
yeah,
I think that's what it was.
lubricants of imagination, and you guys, wasn't drinking, but I was there, and we were all in Nine kitchen, and I think it was Jamie, perhaps, or someone who there was a bottle of vodka, and they're like, Alexandra, oh, because we were also talking about we will send an abstract to, I think it was the AAA, or
Oh, yes, yes, yes. The
and we
American
needed
Anthropological Association.
a name, and it was like, here's a bottle. It says Zabrovka. Alexandra Zabrovka.
It's a bottle, it's a very famous Polish vodka that has a
Iceland.
bison grass in it. And I don't know why I had a bottle. I mean, I like it, but I don't know why I had a
I don't know
bottle.
why you had a bottle either.
Someone
I
maybe
think,
must have brought
well, I
it.
mean, a lot of people brought stuff for the party,
That's what, yeah.
but
Oh, and it's such
that's,
a
Because
perfect
we had
last
that
name.
We had the Polish girl.
oh, yeah.
I bet she bought it.
Ella.
So, Ella, and I think it's important to mention Ella, right, Maureen?
Yeah.
Um,
Emma just kind of disappeared. Was she?
so she, at some point, Alexandra Zabrovka sent text messages to people. And
Yeah.
I think one of you told me this. I did not know this, but Alexandra Zabrovka sent Ella a text message, and she didn't know what the number was, and actually really freaked out.
Because the text message she sent to everybody was, I'm outside your door, or I'm outside, something like that. And it really scared Ella bad, and she was
Yeah,
done with Zubrovka after that.
yeah, and I think that yeah, I didn't realize. I sort of remember this, but I think that we were like, that's cool. This is not, it's this is
Yeah,
not.
I think Alexandra Zabrevka sort of backed off on personal communication after that and
Yeah,
became sort of a vessel through which we could discuss collectivity and imagination,
yeah.
Yeah.
right?
So
Because she would show up in physical ways, but not in scary ways. Like for everyone's birthday, like she would bring them a cake. She would send them a cake,
Yes,
right?
via somebody else. Yes.
Exactly, because she's always traveling. That was her whole thing. Is she's always traveling, doing other anthropology-esque things, and so she always missed everyone's birthday, but she would send a gift. And so for Maureen's, we were at the student union of the school next to our school where we like to go have a drink, and I think that was for your birthday, right?
Yeah.
A random student came in and said, "Oh, and Alexander Zubrovka asked me to bring you this cake."
Yes.
and also during field work, right? Because again, like we were like in a way, I think field work is when we all really came together. Like because
Weirdly, because we were all very separate.
we were all very separate
But
and
that's
did
where Alexandra Zubrovka shone in her
yeah.
individuality.
And so yeah, so Zabrovka also transformed, right? Like
Oh,
um
hold on. She appeared in the field by sending us postcards.
Mhm.
yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that. I was gonna see, so I mean during field work, she was there, and little known fact, there was a song that was also written about her love affair with one of the professors in the department
Oh my
that
gosh, yes.
that I met.
Oh, that's right. I
I
forgot about that whole story. I think I just pushed it out of my memory. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
it's also why she was reluctant to come back to SOAS.
After the field work.
Oh my God. Why'd you have to remind me of that?
Sorry.
Forgot all about that.
Uh,
But yeah, Alexandra Zubrovka transformed as we needed her to transform.
yes.
That nimbleness, to steal a word from our conversation with the AFS people, that nimbleness, like, kept her with us longer.
Hmm.
Yeah. But maybe this is a good point to actually talk about, like that transformation of Alexandra Zabrovka in some ways, of course, was emblematic of like how how SORA was transforming. But SORA has continued to transform, right?
Mhm.
And maybe we can talk a little bit about how it's continued to transform, but also how we see it maybe transforming ahead.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you, Sahil, since you brought it up.
Ah, why did I do it? Me and my stupid mouth.
Oh,
No, no, but I mean, I
it's a
think.
smart mouth.
Uh, well,
Your smart mouth, smart mouth.
smart mouth, that's for sure. That's what got me in trouble with Trevor. The convener, sorry.
The convener.
The convener. Apologies.
I mean,
You can
he's
just
just
bleep.
pretty racist, so.
No. But no, I think yeah, it's important, right, to talk about how we all came together, but after the PhD, I think, even during the PhD, towards the end of it, we had people not coming back to London, coming back at various points and leaving. And, our kind of at some point Zubrovka's Facebook became less active, shall we put it that way? Is that a good euphemism?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but her letters stopped coming with much frequency and then stopped completely almost. The Facebook account, I don't think has been active. I don't even know if it's still there. I think I have the password somewhere,
We
but
could always look, yeah.
yeah, but like it's also indicative of how we as a community changed and how we were also keeping in touch with each other, not necessarily as the herd, but in those different groups. And it didn't, we occasionally have come together, I think once in COVID, for a big Zoom call and stuff. But in we still continue to be in touch, just in different ways.
Yeah.
And we still continue to work in different fields, but on similar things, or even in similar fields in different ways. And I think that, it's for me, in a way, what Maureen and both Naintar, you guys brought up was that expanding this community of Sora. I think this podcast, in a way, sort of part of that transformation um, of our community that began, that was
Yeah.
below us.
No, I mean, I think like, you brought up the Zoom call we did in 2020, and it was the first time, well, I think we all met, well, most of us met in London. When was that? 2014, maybe?
2010.
No.
Yeah, because we graduated in like
Oh,
2020.
No,
Or
for
15.
the when I was working with Caitlin,
oh yeah. That was 20. You weren't there. That was 2014.
2014, 2015, something like that. Yeah.
It would have
So
been 2015 because I had moved to Leeds, 2015.
we had all gotten together, whoever was in London had gotten together then, and it was because one of the people from our cohort had started like a company, like a online website thing, and I was working with them, and everyone showed up. Like you came from Leeds, like everyone who could come, really like showed up because that was sort of that's the basis of it, right? It's showing up. Even then, like later in 2020, we had that like larger Zoom call, and in all honesty, people like I'll say Nadim, right? I have nothing against Nadim. Nadim has nothing against me, but I don't think we would ever just like talk
Hang
to
out.
each other. We wouldn't hang out. We're not friends. We have very different views of the world. But he showed up because it's not about me as the person who like sent out an email to everyone, right? It's about showing up for this space in which we all show up for each other, right? It's communal. It's sort of like what are those things where everyone like puts in money and then everyone gets money each month from those. It's like
Social events.
Oh my gosh, Sahil, you and I it should be ashamed that we can't think of this word off the top of our head because it's in both of our dissertations.
What is the
Yes,
word?
it's called intimac. But I can't remember in English.
But you know what I'm talking about, right? Like you all have to put in,
I mean, that's
out, right? And
social
it's like
security.
No.
you're such an
It's
asshole. But like it is this idea not specifically of friends getting together, but of a place in which you show up for each other and others will show up for you. And which is a different thing than friendship, I think. It's definitely a part of friendship, but I think like this specific space was like it's not it's not a friend group, right? Like Sora is the old Sora, not Sora the podcast, but the old Sora was not like a friend group. It was a community in a very different, well, not different, but like in a very granular articulation of what is community, right? And so I think that like that's what Alexandra was. She is this collection of all of us that didn't exist because of our similarities or because of that kind of idea that we had to be there together. She was sort of there because she exists, because all of our care for each other kind of exists. And this is sort of the vessel that we put it in.
Yes, she was a product of our circumstance. And she could only exist in those circumstances, so to speak. And then when our circumstances changed and we sort of dispersed, we were no longer the cohort, we were just ourselves. The relationships that we formed lasted for as long as they lasted, but Zubrovka sort of fell away.
Yeah.
Guys, this is also like there's so much stuff that's written in trauma about this, right? You know.
I mean, I tell people that it was like going to war. Like that's why we all bonded to get together. We had a trauma bond. We had the kind of bond that like people coming back from war have with each other.
There
Because it
was,
was bad. It was bad. I don't know how to like
I mean, there's research
articulate how
that's been
bad it
done.
was.
There's research.
That a lot of us were having suicidal thoughts during this time. That's
The fact that we had to create Sora and Alexandra Zubrovka, and here we are over 10 years later talking about it, I think is like an indication of how bad it was, you know?
But you know, there is all this research out there on like, you know, I forget, it was one of these things, you know, that they like to do now, a lot of like looking at science and the body and emotion, like about how a lot of PhD and postdoc students have the same levels of whatever, I forget which
stress and anxiety as people in
yeah, as people in war. And that's, you know, like there's actual research that's been done on it. But I think this comes back sort of the thing that I was interested in. It's like, you know, we see these structures of like whatever, but it's like, you know, there's an article written every month about it since at least I can remember since, you know, early 2000s. But
yeah,
well, for me, the stuff with Zubrovka, with Sora, it was an imagining, right, of an alternative way out. I think that, yeah, like that's
because we couldn't physically get out of the situation, but we could imagine our way out, so to speak.
Yeah. And it speaks to what you were saying, Sahil, earlier about how the department and the convener wanted to atomize us, right? And like Zubrovka is the sort of embodiment, quote unquote, of our push against that.
Getting together.
Or push against that. Or like, no, you're not. We're so one that we are one person. We are one creation.
I think that, like, you know, it's probably not a topic for this this podcast, but we then actually did that together after field work, right? Like there was an issue in the department where we actually did come together and be like, no.
You guys showed up in a way that I did not actually think would happen because it was at everyone's detriment to do so.
What I do, you know, Maureen, you told me to quit that first year, and you were very right. I think, in retrospect.
Wait, did she tell? Did she? She told
I think I meant walk away.
Walk away.
We did a walk away.
You were like
unhappy.
Yeah, but also because basically, you know, Magnus and Trevor were pushing me not to do the project that I got.
That's right, and I knew you wouldn't be happy. That's what killed you. It wasn't. I mean, I hate to say that, but it wasn't all the other terrible stuff that happened. It was the fact that you didn't get to do your dream.
No, exactly.
Because they were trying to push me away from my dream too, and I was like, I'm not going through all this misery to not write about what I want to.
Yeah. That's, I mean, that's, that's exactly it. Like, that's like what I've like been discussing in counseling for like a while.
Man,
Not this
I
time.
mean,
Shall we explain this situation?
yeah,
I think,
I don't know. Someone else needs to go.
all right. I mean, Maureen, do you want to?
Because Maureen was there. Okay. All right. I
Oh,
got
okay.
kicked out of the department at the end of year 3 or beginning of year 4,
Do
something
you
like
want to
that.
explain for our listeners what that is exactly? Because it wasn't just that, oh, you got kicked out of the department. You got kicked out at a very crucial point.
Yes.
In a very,
After,
very dirty way, if I can say that.
oh, yeah. So I got kicked out after field work as we were like, we had to, in order to start our last year of the PhD, you had to turn in your first draft of your dissertation. And I turned it in, and the feedback I got on it was, you are being kicked out of the department. Now, a few months prior to that, my supervisor had tried to also get me deported from the country. So I was
Contacting Homeland Security or whatever it is.
whatever there.
What's it? It was
Ordered-
Because you were at a wedding.
No, because I was home for Christmas and I had stayed a week or two longer at home. And it was because, there had been family medical emergencies that had happened. And I had like moved my ticket, emailed people in the department, emailed my supervisor, blah, blah, and had not gotten a response. Right. So, like, if there is no response, like, hey, no, this is going to be a problem, then I don't know that it's going to be a problem because honestly, any sane person would be like, hey, you're having a pretty major family medical emergency. Sure, it's an extra week, and then that got rolled because the emergent, like, we thought it'd be fine. And then there was something else that happened. Right. Um, and, the thing is, the department wasn't very strict on these rules because other people had been in and out of the country. And that's like, you're not supposed to do that when you're on the student visa. So it wasn't that the department actually cared. It was that my supervisor was trying to remove me from the department
Mm-hmm.
without, but had no other leg to do so, no other avenue to do so. So
I think
I mean, that's the
I
basic.
think that's a really good explanation. But the one thing that I would add for our listeners is
Yeah.
that, you know, what would happen, what often happens in any institution, right, is that there was a deadline by which any corrections need to be made. And what all of us saw, because we were all in touch with each other, because we had by now become Sora and would share, what was going on with us. You know, and just correct me if I'm wrong, Nayantar, but basically you had submitted,
Mhm.
your document, which for many other people,
Mhm.
uh, they were told by their supervisors that this is just pro forma. It doesn't actually matter what you send. You're going to move on because we understand you can't write, a thesis or like the semblance of,
In one summer,
in one
right?
summer. And
It was
many,
the summer between coming back from field work
yeah.
and then starting the next academic year.
And
And
that was part of the major stress that we were under, is that we're constantly under this ever ticking clock.
And we were told by many people that this is just pro forma. However, because there's actually no oversight and there's no accountability for some of us, Maureen and myself included, and Antara, whom people wanted to get kicked out, it could be made a problem if they wanted it to be. And in Nayantara's case, what happened was Nayantara received no feedback until just days before the deadline for submission of any revisions. And the feedback was, this is unacceptable, right? Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Which was another thing, we were never told why things, we were never given actual feedback. And so it was done in a very calculated way.
Yeah.
Make sure that Nayantara would not be able to provide, revisions in time, and therefore would not be able to pass on to the next level. And effectively for, people who are listening, you have to realize we're also several, of us were self-funded, like So, and we're talking about, we initially went in when fees were like, I think, 8,000 something pounds a year. And in that first year, they jumped to like 10,000, even
Yeah.
jump. So it's not just financial stress. It's not just constant immigration stress that you're going to be kicked out of the country. It's not just the stress that you're being told that you're incompetent and you don't know, but then it's this very real stress of not having money and like having invested a lot that is just going to vanish, or you feel it vanish.
I
And then
mean,
not
that's
having the support you need throughout.
Yeah, I mean that was a big thing, right? Because so I appealed that decision. We can get into all of this in a different episode, but one of the major points of my appeal is like I printed out all of my emails to my supervisor, and we like did a calculation, and it was like 30% of them had gotten responses. Like, and I would email very specific questions. I'm looking at this. Do you have a reading recommendation? Do you have any literature that I should be looking at? And just like literally no response. And that, you know, when you're doing a PhD, that was like what, 3 years of doing that, or 2 years, 2.5 years of just like that kind of what is it, neglect, I guess? Because I remember talking about it in this like weird, I'm paying for a service. And that's like not how I go through the world. That's like not how I measure things. But like, I'm taking on student loans in order to do this, and I'm not getting any response from a supervisor. That feels like I'm just not getting my money's worth in a very
So,
capitalist space.
so I just want to explain something here. Like the problem with supervision wasn't just lack of response, because in a natural if a supervisor was more like a mentor and an advisor relationship,
Mm-hmm.
then you wouldn't be having these very specific emails about what I'm looking for this topic. What do you suggest that I read? Because you would be having ongoing conversations, and your supervisor would be into these topics, and they would be getting you into these topics, and they would always be suggesting readings, and you would always be suggesting readings to them, because there would be
Right.
some give and take, because there would be dialogue between yourself and your mentor.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the relationship that
No. And actually, because I had taken this issue to other people in the department to be like, can I switch supervisors? Blah, blah. Like, I did it in conjunction with one of my supervisor's other supervisee, right? We went to someone and said, we are having an issue. And they acted very shocked. And they were like, no one's ever had this issue before. We're like, well, both of us are having this issue now. Which is part of that SORA thing, right? Because I hadn't even thought about going to someone until I found out that this other person was like, hey, I have a meeting with someone in the department about our supervisor. Do you want to tag along? And I was like, yes. And because that person otherwise would have tried to gaslight one of us into saying, no one's ever had an issue with this supervisor before. What are you talking about? But then the two of us were there, and I remember saying, well, both of us are having the same issue. So something's going on.
Yeah.
And
and
that was
that's
the
what
advice that I received from this person was like, well, you can't expect too much. Ask specific questions.
uh,
Yeah.
and I think, I mean, that makes sense, because also Sahil and I got to compare our relationship
Mm-hmm.
with our supervisor, because we shared supervisors, and we also learned to have zero expectations and not actually expect to be supervised.
Yeah,
Because our research was so close, and I could get supervision from outside of the department,
right.
from people from the United States. So I was getting externally supervised,
Mm,
and then I was able to give as much moral
Yeah.
support to Sahil as possible. So like we were able to find a different way out. Otherwise, we could have very well been in the exact same situation you were in.
yeah. And I
And I
think,
think that's what everybody knew. Everybody knew that we
yeah,
all could be in your situation.
that's what, okay. So the person I think who sort of led the charge with meeting with the department, I'm just not going to name names. I'm so sorry. Um, who had put together like an agenda and everything. I was like, why are you even doing this? I remember talking to them later, like, it was I did not expect that response that like, we're going to go in there, we're going to demand some answers, some accountability, we're going to have a meeting, put together an agenda. Like I was so shocked that someone would put together an agenda to talk about what happened to me. And they were like, because it could happen to any of us.
I
If it
think
can
we need
happen to
to.
you, it can happen to any of us. And it was interesting because of what I had been through, right, with the supervisor. I had such imposter syndrome that there was a part of me that was like, yeah, well, I'm obviously the dumbest one here. I would deserve to be kicked out. And it was so interesting to hear from everyone else that's like, no, this could happen to any of us. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. I'm not
So
so dumb.
I think we need to, let the listeners know also what happened.
Yeah,
So, I started off by saying, like, if we were talking about how Alexander Zaborka was this way, for us to like kind of fight back and
show up, but
run
no.
with imagination. But we also, I mean, I think it then also allowed us to get to the point where we could come together, because when this happened, I remember it was like we were all talking to each other and we're like, did you hear this? Do you know? And it was like, we have to do something. Because also, as you said, it wasn't just that it happened to you, but it was just, and not just that it could happen to any of us, but it was happening
Mm,
to some of us. And it already was like there were people that were actively being trying to get
that's true.
down.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Everyone was on a similar trajectory. I just got to the end point before any of you.
But
And
also,
we had people who chose to leave because they knew they saw it coming.
Mm,
Like we lost one, two, three or four people just in that
yeah,
period of time.
yeah. But also, it was this feeling of like they have done this to someone. Like they have actually, I think, I don't think that we, like, how should I say this? It's not that we didn't believe that it happened, but it was anger. It was like,
Yeah.
how dare this happen? And we had to do something.
mm.
So I don't know, Maureen, if you want to talk about like
Well,
what,
Maureen was there when I got the email. This was the other thing is like, I got this email that said basically you're being kicked out. And then the convener and the people who were sort of responsible for this kind of bounced and handed all these cohort issues and departmental issues to someone who knew nothing about the history of this,
yeah.
who then like we had to then deal with that level of incompetence. Anyways, so okay,
Well,
I
So
got
what
I got
happened?
the email. I couldn't read it. I asked Maureen to read it. You can take it from there.
All I remember, I don't remember reading the email. I just remember Nayantara like covering her mouth because she was going to gasp, but she made no sound. And then she was in the hallway between her room and my room. And then she literally, like, her legs buckled under her and she fell on the floor. And I was like, Nayantara, this is the symptoms of mourning. Why are you doing this? You know, because, and she was like amused at me, but also like ready to die at that moment.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then she had me read the email, so I understood what was happening, and I was trying to like take it in and be supportive at the same time. And then, like, once, because Nayantara is not one to like weep, so she was like, just started baking. And
Well, no, I wept for about 5 minutes. I needed
that's what I
catharsis.
mean. You didn't, and then you just were like, I have to do something, but I don't know what to do. And then you just started baking, and you just started using my bedroom as this cooking rack.
Well, I didn't have enough room in the kitchen to hold all the things I was baking because I stress baked for the rest of the weekend.
Yes.
And
I
so
baked a lot.
Maureen's room ended up holding all the surplus baked goods.
And then we brought them with us on Monday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we had so much baked goods. I mean, we're not bring baked goods, and we filled in, and then we like were slowly filling in the cohort as to what happened. And
Well,
I
I
remember
think I
telling
emailed
them,
them. I
the email,
emailed everyone.
email,
Yes, because people were kind of circulating maybe like what color are we going to wear on Monday because it was the first Monday of the school year. And they had wanted to do a mixer or something and then a seminar with the new cohorts that's coming
that's
in.
right.
And so I responded to the thread, "Hey guys, I just got kicked out." Like it was very sort of
so
like casual almost.
And at
but
that mixer, Stephen Hughes introduced us as the weird cohort that always wears the same colors.
But
Really?
also, I don't know. So there's two things. One, it wasn't that they bounced just like of their own accord. It was that the convener changed to this incompetent person, right? But they very easily then again, there was no accountability
Mm-hmm.
for what had happened. And I think we were all so upset at that mixer. We basically all stood there stone faced and they wanted us to say how wonderful it was, and none of us said anything. And instead, when Stephen Hughes was talking about how this department is so supportive, I think I laughed and Kate, like,
Oh, I heard about this. Yes.
Because we got in trouble. We got
yeah,
in trouble for our
and
bad behavior. Like
we got
we
in
were
trouble.
Like we're
thrilled.
children?
Yes,
Yeah,
because
because
we were not putting on good faces and making other people thrilled with the department. We were just like, we hate
yeah,
you all, letting the seething anger
and
off of us.
we weren't. I mean, we were all angry, and we didn't hide it. We
Yeah.
Mm.
showed because like, and yeah, and they also used that against us at some point.
Oh my
Yeah, I
gosh, I
remember
didn't know
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember us getting in trouble for our attitudes, basically.
My gosh.
but I
Yeah, I
think
mean, I
right,
had a meeting with Stephen Hughes because he offered to give me time to talk about it. And it was going to be after the mixer. So I did show up. I was not allowed to come to the mixer, but I did show up. And then we had a whole conversation where he had been woefully underprepared to deal with any of this, like what was going on in my situation. What I think he was also coming straight from the mixer where all of you had made your discontent known.
because it was also like we had right. It was sometime before the mixer that we had the meeting with them, right, Maureen? Like
No, it was after you guys,
It
right?
was all happening at the same time. Like it was
it
all like
was
it was a little bit before because we I think we
we
went and we tried to talk to Kit, remember?
we had the meeting before. I
Was
remember that
that day?
we had the meeting before. I don't know if it was the day or the day before, but we had a meeting before this mixer happened because
Yes.
that's why
Well,
we were
okay,
told
here's the
that there was
timeline.
no mixer.
The timeline is I got the email on a Friday and the mixer was on a Monday.
Was
So
it?
if you guys were having, yeah,
So
I
I know
think
that
we had
we
the
must have.
meeting before the mixer.
I don't think so.
I think we had it after. I think the mixer was like insanely awkward.
I
And
Okay.
think the
I
meeting
think
was a
as we were
response.
leaving the
Yeah.
mixer, we were like,
Yeah.
we want to talk to, and I think they were also
Yeah.
like, we want to talk to you.
Yeah.
I got called out in the hall, like, you two, we need to talk to you. And we're like, you know,
But I think also by that point, neither of us were afraid anymore
yeah.
because
Or we were so angry that we didn't
yeah.
care.
Well, also it's because like I think like Maureen, you had a much better sense of like self going into the PhD. I think I went to it thinking like, oh, this person is going to be like an advisor and a mentor, which didn't happen. But I think like after fieldwork, it just became so blatantly clear, and like with this up and I think a lot of us were just like, oh, I have nothing to lose. So,
Um,
but
Yeah.
anyway, so we had this meeting, and I think it's important to talk about this meeting because like for me, that's like you know it was sort of us showing a
what's
wanting.
what's interesting about the meeting, so you all called this meeting as a cohort to talk to the department, and you invited me to join because you also wanted to talk about what was going on, like how could this possibly have happened, blah blah. And I remember the department tried to tell me that I would not be allowed into this meeting. And I think maybe someone kicked up a bit of a fuss about that. And that's why I was allowed in the meeting, but I was not allowed to speak. And no one was allowed to address me or address my situation. I just had to sit there. And I think I sat between the two of you.
Yes, I remember that. And I remember the Italians were just like asking, especially Alessia was asking really good questions. Like Alessia was like, why wouldn't you have told her before that,
Mm-hmm.
things needed to change? Like, how did it get to this point? You know, I remember it really pressing them, but we weren't, there was no answers. But
No.
they felt pressured for sure. They felt pressured.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what, I'm going to bring it back. That's what showing up is, right? Like, like I said before, none of you needed to be angry at that mixer. None of you needed to call for a meeting and invite me and ask questions about what was going on with me. And I know that part of it is also like getting some answers for yourselves, but also it's putting your neck on the line a little bit. And whether you are angry or not, like it is showing up. It is showing up for someone else. And like that was, I think that almost, not to be cheesy, but that almost like got me through it. You know, it was like, oh my gosh, these people are really showing up for me. Like, wow, that's amazing. That's what I got out of this experience. And it is what I take with me now as like the experience of doing a PhD. It's kind of why I don't consider myself an anthropologist because that's definitely not what I got out of that PhD.
You're an anthropologist, Nye, and a folklorist. You know, we also got, I think, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly, we did get some minute changes. Like Kit took over the research seminar, and we had told her how we just hated the environment, and she did that change it to a Q&A session where people would ask questions about people's research as opposed to criticizing it. And I remember the other people scoffing that this was no longer of any academic value. I remember that.
We also, one of the things that we had said, that there's no professionalization, that we're just treated like, cash cows, basically.
Yeah.
And what's the point of coming here? And so then they instituted this thing of like once or twice this semester having like a seminar on something like where to publish or when to publish. And the thing that was laughable, I went to one of those, was that the supervisor specifically had been telling me, do not publish, and sort of using some ideas, either consciously or subconsciously. But and in this thing we were told, oh, actually you should think about publishing at these points, and I'm like, this is just a joke. Like, this is a little joke. And then when we sort of, and it was like, not only because they were giving us the opposite information to what some of us have been told, but also we had no time. Like, we could not publish and do all the things that need to be done in the time that we need to submit this thing or like get kicked out of the program.
Yeah. I mean, they told us like, don't even bother about like conferences and blah, blah, blah. And I think we did that on our own. It wasn't because anyone emailed us and said, hey, there's a conference coming up. You might want to submit. Go ahead. Sorry.
They also created this false sense of that we were running out of time. Right? There was no need to do that. It could have been slow and steady, wins the race. Like, just plan it out, be methodical, make your deadlines. I get that. But it was always like, you're running out of time. You're running out of time. We're not going to help you, but you're running out of time. And so there's always a sense of panic. And that's why I got done a year early, because I was like, I can't keep running at this pace.
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible.
I mean, you also went back to Ohio because it wasn't.
I needed my family. I needed to be with my family. I knew I would literally not live the experience if I didn't go.
Which I think is helpful. You were able to get out of the space because like, just I remember going into that campus even. I mean, it's hardly a campus, but like seeing that building would give me like heart palpitations, right? Like,
remember, I used to take valerian every time we sat, and I started off just taking one valerian before the research seminar, but at some point I was taking like 4 or 5 of them.
Oh my gosh.
I would always drink it with soda, and then I would sit and burp, and Neil would sort of laugh at me every time I burped that, because valerian tastes foul. It tastes like farts. So
that's really interesting. So I mean, to this day, I do not go there. I just have to occasionally. It does have a really amazing library, and I've had to like look at some things, but I just don't go. Like, I don't like that space. But what I started doing was, whenever I would, if I wasn't on my bike, or even if I had to go, I would just go through every single park I could go through before getting there. It's just like green space.
Yeah.
Like, this is so nice, even though I have to go to Mordor. I used to call it Mordor.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It was such a horrible place.
But so, do you think? Sorry, you were going to say something else, Santa.
No, I was just going to say, like, to kind of sort of bring it back to sort of where we are now, that experience in being like a very outside of our academic training experience, right? Showing up, demanding a meeting, like this is organizing, this is activism, this is advocacy. It might have been really small and on this very small level, but it made a difference. It made a difference. They changed, however, slightly for the rest of your time there. It changed, I think, how I approached my life. Like I did appeals. This was actually very funny. The new convener was trying to tell me like, oh, like an appeal takes a lot of time. You don't want to appeal. And I was like, I'm not doing a PhD anymore. What? I have time. Like, what do you think? What do you think? I'm going to continue doing my PhD? Like, I have so much time now. And I was so proud of my appeal. It was all printed and in this big binder and tabbed, and there was like an index. It was beautiful. Anyways, I think that was a little bit of my foray into as an adult fighting the system, which I am now doing. Do you know what I mean? Like I was like, oh, I'm going to be an academic and I'm going to fight the system through these like more subtle ways. I'm going to write and, not criticize anyone specifically, but just like through like academic writing. And then it's become like a whole like fuck you to the system. Just very, I'm not interested in your capitalist bourgeoisie bullshit anymore. And I think it was really that space or that process. And I think that's one of the interests I have is what people have learned being in the academy, but not from yeah, or from not what their academics taught them, but for what they learned outside of that and how that's brought them to where they are now.
I think for me, this experience that you're talking about taught me about myself that I am a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can herd people, but I'm not but it also taught me the type of leader I am. So I'm like a cultivating, nurturing type.
I thought you were going to say a cult leader.
So you're the cult leader, remember? I'm like I like to bring people together and kind of encourage them and motivate them, but I trust them to like figure things out for themselves. And I learned that about myself during this PhD, that's for sure.
That's
and through
amazing.
These processes.
That's really amazing. And I mean, I can see that because I feel like you talk about yourself before the PhD in a way that I don't recognize the person you are. Do you know what I mean?
Did I exist before the PhD? I don't.
Well, not for us, you didn't.
We all just like spontaneously appeared on SOAS's campus on that first day.
Well,
Choose the heel.
what about like what did I take away from?
Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah. Sorry, no, I was actually thinking about something completely different.
Sure.
He needs to be the teacher.
No. It's because we were talking about Maureen like magically appearing. Like literally, that's how I feel because I walked into that room and I just plopped down next to you, and we had like the same idea for a research project, the same supervisor, same like quirky ideas about like
Maybe Maureen is a figment of your imagination that's
Yeah,
being
yeah.
real.
I had a dream
Well-
about that once, being a figment of somebody's imagination. It screwed me up for like a week. Do not make me revisit that experience.
Oh my god. No, I think like it's hard. Like I think that there's some ways in which I am still processing stuff. When I finished, someone was like, it's gonna take at least 5 years to get over this PhD stuff. And
Really?
yeah, and at the time I was like, oh ha ha ha. Like I'm put together. But I think like there's some stuff like that, it just it like any trauma, it just takes time to like work out of your body and like but I think like for me definitely immediately that year that we came back from fieldwork I realized wow this process made me actually really see that even though so I didn't see myself as an anthropologist going into this. I had a background in like all kinds of stuff, and I have continued to do all kinds of stuff. But I was like, okay, for me, anthropology turned into this. It was a toolkit.
Mm,
It's like I actually have all these tools to have every single year. I had to change what I was doing and very
right.
quickly grasp a complicated, field and like come up with something. And I was like, wow, I actually, I went into this thinking I know nothing. And sort of like, and Maureen, I have to credit you to this. I credit you for this. Is that, you consistently said to me like, no, Magnus doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, you make sense. And like, I walked away from this thinking, wow, all of us we were so adept at very quickly analyzing, recalibrating, and delivering something for, that's not exactly what I say. And that's kind of for me what I took away from this was like I lost the sort of fear of like, oh, I don't know how to handle something because I've just had multiple things in very short amount of time with very few resources. And
True.
yeah, so yeah, I don't know that, so maybe more self-confidence, I suppose.
More
No, I mean that.
it's like you grounded yourself in your skills. Like you came into that PhD with a lot of skills, but then you somehow like
Mm,
use a plant analogy, your roots got deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, when we first started, I was very impressed by Sahil's pedigree, not just going to Georgetown.
Yeah, see, when we first started, I was like, oh my God, all these people are so like, they know anthropological things. I don't know nothing.
I was coming from such an arts background, so I was like, he went to LSE and you had been working, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh damn, I am not cut out for this. But then I met other people who were in the same trajectory as me, and I was like, okay, I feel better.
That's why I just wear my Ohio shirt because I was like, I'm not even going to pretend to be up to par. I'm just going to let everyone know that I'm from Ohio and I like it like that.
Oh yeah, we should mention that Maureen did wear a different Ohio shirt almost every day,
I
or at
bought them
Columbus.
just to protest.
And now I have an Ohio shirt and a Ohio sweatshirt.
Oh my God,
Ohio
I need
magnet.
to come to Ohio.
I'll send it to you. I mean, I sell
I
them
want
in the
to
Turkish
I
store.
want to come and see this mythical place of Columbus, Ohio.
You need
It truly is. Like I went to go visit for her kid's baptism and I came away being like, I understand the magic now. I was there
to
for like 4 days, maybe less. And I was like looking at houses to buy in Ohio. The magic is real. I'm going back.
She met a princess. Like on her first day, she met a princess.
Sure, I did meet a.
Uh,
So,
so go ahead.
no, you come. I think we're going to say the same thing. So,
I was just going to wrap up.
just to finish up on this one, we could talk a little bit about, what people might expect in
Yeah,
the
I
upcoming
think
podcast.
actually one of the things we sort of missed with how we're talking about this podcast is that our plan is to do interviews. We want to get people in and talk to different people who are in the academy, out of the academy, whatever, some tie to the academy in whatever form, and talk to them. Like not just interview, but have a conversation with them about something that interests them around these topics that we've brought up already. And just as like a kind of format note, I think because we all live in different time zones and have very busy lives, we're thinking about this as being a two host situation where it's always going to cycle through. So you're not going to hear from all three of us every single episode. Um, but I think, yeah, that's sort of what the podcast is looking like in our
And
And
imaginations, and that could
and
change.
and what we really would like is we don't want to just we want people who are like thinkers and movers and shakers in their own sphere, whatever sphere that is. But we don't just want to know about their work. We want to know about their humanity.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know about themselves as people.
Yeah.
Um, so we want Yeah, we want interesting stories and interesting conversations.
Yes,
And it's
exactly.
important to mention here that, we're talking, we're inviting you as listeners and others to join, right, the Society of Reluctant Anthropologists.
Mhm.
I was saying, like, you don't have to be an anthropologist because, as I said, for me, anthropology is a toolkit, it's an orientation, it's an approach. And I think all of us sort of share that. So, we invite you to join us as listeners, as participants, maybe at some point. I think we have some people lined up, right, guys?
Yes.
Uh,
And however you want to engage, you are part of the Society of Reluctant Anthropologists now.
and
You
so,
can start wearing the same color as the podcast.
Okay, so I guess this is sort of the end of the podcast, and let's
I think
wrap
it
it
is.
up. Hey there, it is editing me again. Hope you enjoyed that first episode of the SORAPod. I know we had a really fun time getting together and talking. We've got a lot of stories, but we've also got a lot of fun guests coming up who have really amazing, cool stories of their own around academia, community, knowledge, everything. So we will be posting our podcasts on our website, www.sorapod.com, and also wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to get in touch, if you want to be on the podcast, if you think that we should talk to someone, get in touch at hello@sorapod.com or use the form on our website. We'll see you next time. No, we won't see you next time because you're listeners. I don't know. I guess you'll hear us next time. How's that?